Today we're going to be talking about the 6 wide receivers you guys want to be avoiding in your 2023 fantasy football drafts this year. I am so pumped for this season. Make sure to subscribe, comment, follow, do your guys' thing on my social media platforms that you always do, and make sure to comment down below if you want me to fully release my positional rankings for the 2023 fantasy football season. Let's get right into this episode. The first guy we're going to be talking about is none other than Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a guy whose ADP is currently sitting at 12 amongst wide receivers, and I have him all the way down at wide receiver 28. 12 is just way too high for my liking, guys. He has only been good when Ja'Marr Chase has not been there. And a majority of the year last year, we saw pretty good Tee Higgins. But that's also because Chase wasn't there. And all analysts do is look at the results from last year and just copy and paste it into this year's rankings. They don't actually think at all. Tee Higgins is probably the third option on his offense behind Ja'Marr Chase and behind Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon had a solid year last year. There's no reason that I would want to waste a top 12 pick amongst wide receivers on a guy who's the second wide receiver on his team and the third offensive weapon on his team. It just does not make any sense. You need to think logically about guys you want to draft. Why would you waste Tee Higgins as a top 12 wide receiver pick when you can draft a wide receiver 1 on a team or a first offensive option on a team? It doesn't make any sense, guys. Please do not draft Tee Higgins this season. The next guy we're going to be talking about is a guy that you all seem to love, and really everyone seems to love, and I have no idea why you guys are so in love with DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. This is a guy whose ADP is number 18 amongst wide receivers, and I have him down at number 29. And everyone tells me that DJ Moore is average, above average, good, even a pretty good wide receiver 1. Guys, do not lie to yourselves. You're not gaining anything from that. DJ Moore is not a good receiver, and you do not want to draft him. Last season, he had 1 game over 20 fantasy points. 1. A top 18 wide receiver doesn't have 1 game over 20 points in their previous season. In the last 5 years, if you guys want to look at a bigger sample, because, you could only use 1 year for any guy. 5 years, he has had 4 games over 20 fantasy points. Less than a game per season, he has over 20 fantasy points. And you guys are all trying to tell me that he is a great receiver, a good receiver. He's a guy that you want on your rosters. Don't do this to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. DJ Moore is not a good receiver. And Justin Fields, on top of that, is not very good at getting the ball to his receivers. He has not proven that he can throw the ball over the top of defenses yet. So why would you waste a top 18 pick on DJ Moore? Why? It makes no sense, you guys. I am trying to enlighten you here. You don't want to draft DJ Moore, and especially not in the top 18 amongst wide receivers. Please don't do this to yourselves. Okay. Tyler Lockett is our next guy. His ADP is currently number 27. I have him all the way down at number 38. This is a guy coming off a pinnacle year last year that he simply just cannot repeat. He is 30 years old. He's going to start slowing down. The injuries are going to start coming. 30 years old is fairly old for a wide receiver in the NFL, guys. And that's just the reality of the life we live in right now. They drafted JSN for a reason. And that reason being because Tyler Lockett is getting old, he's slowing down, and he's eventually going to get replaced by JSN. And that year could be this year for all we know. But when you get a guy drafted who's young, explosive, dynamic, hungry behind you in the depth chart, it's not a good sign. Not a good sign at all. The team wouldn't have drafted JSN if they didn't need him and they didn't want to use him. That's just the reality of the situation. Between DK, who's solid, Lockett, who was solid last year, JSN, Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and even Geno Smith, who runs the ball a little bit, there are a lot of guys who are going to be need to getting volume to have decent fantasy football projection or production. And that's just a risk that I'm not willing to take with a 30-year-old who had a rookie drafted behind him who's also coming off a pinnacle year last season. There are way too many variables. He can only go down from what he had in his, top 12, top 15 year last year. So I am not willing to go with Tyler Lockett this season. The next guy we're going to be talking about, having some computer trouble, is in a similar situation to Tyler Lockett, and that is Brandon Aiyuk. This is a guy who is going as wide receiver number 28, and I have him all the way down at wide receiver number 59. Yes, 59, and I don't want to hear the fact that this is just a ridiculous rating, because you guys didn't even know who Brandon Aiyuk was last year. And he was probably a lot lower than wide receiver 59. And now you're going to tell me that 59 is just an outrageous number to rank him at when he's currently going at number 28, and he was even better last year. Guys, just like Tyler Lockett, he's coming off a pinnacle year and can only go significantly down. And I'm talking significantly down. No one knew who Brandon Aiyuk was before last year. And just like Lockett and the Seahawks offense, the 49ers offense is arguably the most dangerous, deep, and elusive offense in the NFL. Between CMC, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, George Kittle, we don't even know what their quarterback situation is because they could have 2 or 3 quarterbacks who are actually decent, just like they do every year. And that's the reason I'm going to be drafting almost none of the 49ers players because it's just way too unpredictable and way too risky. They're all being drafted way too high compared to the risk that comes with drafting every single one of those guys in CMC, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, all of these guys, just like Brandon Aiyuk. You don't want to waste such a high draft pick in a wide receiver when you can get so many more guarantees from other guys who are the only guys on their offense. And that's just the fact of the matter. The next guy we're going to be talking about is Jahan Dotson of the Commanders. His ADP is currently number 34. I have him all the way down at number 62, just cracking the top 64. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is a guy who I would be willing to change my opinion on because he is arguably on the worst offense in the NFL. The Commanders have 0 stars, 0 good skill players, and truthfully, they don't really have anyone better than Jahan Dotson. So I could see a case that you make for him being a guy that could have a breakout year this year. But I'm certainly not going to include him on my sleeper video. I'm certainly not going to include him as just an average player. I just would not want to draft a guy on the Commanders offense at all. But especially not a guy going this early when you can get so much better value for a Commanders player later in your drafts because he's not really any better than the 5 skill players on the Commanders offense. Or worse for that matter. I mean, same argument either way. Terry McLaurin is pretty good, but he's not what he used to be. And I just don't think a top 35 receiver in fantasy should be going on a terrible offense with Sam Howell throwing him the ball. Sam Howell throwing him the ball should be enough to make you guys steer away from Terry McLaurin and everyone else on that offense. They are going to be terrible. So I am not buying into Jahan Dotson this year. That is for sure. And the last guy we're going to be talking about is a guy that everyone loves, and that is George Pickens on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everyone thinks that this guy is the wide receiver 1 on his team. They watch his crazy one-handed catches, his plowing over the cornerbacks when blocking on run plays. Whenever you open Instagram, they're going to tell you this guy is the wide receiver 1. The highlight reels are going to tell you this guy is the wide receiver 1. He's not. He's going ahead of Deontay Johnson in drafts for no reason. Deontay got so many more targets last year. Deontay had a very productive year as a wide receiver. Not a great fantasy season, but he didn't have any touchdowns, and he was still average. So imagine if Deontay starts catching touchdowns this year. Not to mention, Deontay's better than George Pickens. Najee Harris is going to have the offense running through him, who's going to have a huge bounce-back year this year. So Najee's really the primary guy on the offense. And Pat Freiermuth is actually a really good receiving tight end. So just like the Seahawks, just like the 49ers, And now the Steelers, there are so many weapons on this Steelers offense that I am just not buying into this George Pickens highlight reel, social media superstar hype that everyone is just choosing to believe. You need to actually look at the stats and use your brain to realize that Deontay Johnson is the wide receiver 1. Najee Harris is the focal point of the offense. And George Pickens isn't really better than Pat Freiermuth. So, drafting him as a top 35 wide receiver is probably not a very good idea, guys. You just got to work through these things. You got to think through these things. Look at the offenses they're on. Look at the guys surrounding them. It's not that hard. You just need to be willing to be different than what everyone tries to tell you to do, because the truth of the matter is that I'm not afraid to be wrong. And these analysts that are talking to you make their rankings out of fear. They put CMC at number 1 overall because they're worried to say that they'll be wrong when he busts, when he gets injured. They don't actually think about what's going on these teams, about what's going on the depth chart, about what's going on in their situations, about how old they are, about how dynamic they are, about if it's a contract year. They don't think about all these things the way I do. So you guys need to steer away from the rankings that they're telling you, because they make them out of fear and they don't actually think. They just look at last year and then they put the rankings together based on last year. That's what they do every year. So please don't listen to them. I'm begging you. I'm doing this for your own good, guys. I'm trying to help. So that's all we got for this video. Those are the 6 wide receivers that I am going to be completely avoiding in Fantasy Football 2023. Make sure to subscribe, follow, comment down below what you think of this list, and let me know if you want me to release my positional rankings. That's all I got for this video. I'm out. See you later, guys.